Hello, seventh graders. I want to take a couple moments and help you to get started using today's Gizmo. We're going to be exploring the Prairie ecosystem Gizmo. And so I'm going to go ahead and get that started over here with you while I show you here on the screen. And so some of the vocabulary that we're going to be talking about include carnivore, consumer, ecosystem, equilibrium, extinct, food chain, herbivore, organism, population, prairie, and producer. And so if you're not familiar with any of those, you might want to go ahead and take a moment and pause this recording and look up any of those that you're not familiar with. And if you're curious where I found all those are all found right up here on your student exploration sheet. So let's go ahead and get started. Prior knowledge questions, I know we always like to talk about those before we begin each gizmo. So an ecosystem consists of all organisms, which we know to be living things, in an area, plus the natural landscape. A prairie is a flat or rolling grassland. Remember, that was a word we talked about when we were talking about our biomes. With few trees, such as in parts of central United States and Canada. Organisms often found in a prairie ecosystem include prairie dogs, swift foxes, black-footed ferrets, and of course grass itself. And so we have here just images of those three of those organisms there. So let's go ahead and talk about the organisms. Which organism, grass, prairie dog, ferret, or fox, do you think is a producer, which means it does not depend on other organisms for food? And I think that we all can come up pretty quickly and know that that includes grass, that grass is a producer. So I'm just going to fill out grass right there on my student exploration sheet. Let's go ahead and think about organisms that depend on other organisms for food are called consumers. So which consumer do you think is a herbivore, which means that it eats plants only, which is a herbivore? And so I'm not sure if many of you would guess this right, but I'm going to look for you to look and say prairie dog here, which is in fact an herbivore, and it's going to eat only our producers. That's what it's going to eat, producers up there. So which consumers are carnivores and eat meat? Well, that's going to leave our other two, right? Our ferret and our fox. So I hope you're following along. I'm trying to leave time so that you can. Okay, the next thing I want to do is take a look at our gizmo and talk about our population. So the population of prairie dogs is all the prairie dogs living in the village. In the gizmo, what are the starting numbers of grass, ferrets, prairie dogs, and foxes? So let me make sure I'm reset here. Okay, so our grass, we have 4,000 tons of grass. I'm going to put that in here. Prairie dogs, we have 25,000 prairie dogs. And let's see, for ferrets, we have 80. And for foxes, you can see here, we have 10. Good. So this tells us we're in our warm-up now. It says, click advance year 10 times. Where's advance year? Right there it is. Look at the bar graph and the line graph. Do the populations change very much, or are they in equilibrium? And equilibrium means stable. So let's go ahead and advance our year 10 times. And you can see where we're advancing our year right up here. So let's go ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, there we go. So now we can take a look at our populations. We can compare these. This is 4,000 and 13 tons of grass. That's very similar to what we have here. 25,000 prairie dogs. Again, in terms of percentages, that's a very, very little difference. Ferrets are the same, and foxes are the same. So what would we say? Would we say that this is that this is stayed in equilibrium and that they're stable, or that it's changed over time? I would probably say that populations are in equilibrium. So I would say populations are in equilibrium, as they have changed very little or not at all over time. So, which we noticed that the grass changed very little, the prairie dogs changed very little, but the ferrets and foxes changed not at all. So that takes us through our first page. Let's go ahead and begin. And I'm just going to walk you through a tiny bit of the second page of our gizmo before I let you go ahead and get started independently. So activity A tells us here to reset the gizmo and be sure that show populations is selected. So I'm going to go ahead and say reset, show populations. That is selected, so we're in good shape there. All right. Next one says observe. Remove all the animals from the prairie by clicking the minus button next to each animal many times. And then click advance year 20 times. Does the grass survive by itself? And explain. Okay, so the first thing it tells us to do is remove all the animals. So let's go ahead and take away the ferrets and the prairie dogs. You can see them kind of disappearing as I click. You notice that? And the foxes. So we've taken away all the animals. Now it's asking us to advance the year 20 times. So we're going to go up right here to advance year. We're going to hit that 20 times, and we're going to watch up here to see if this as this goes to 20. There we go, 20 times. And so what happens to the grass? Now remember that our grass started off, if we look back at our first page, our grass started off at 4,000 tons. So what's our grass now? We see here we have 8,000 tons of grass. So I would say that the grass survives without any problem at all, right? The population rises to 8,000 tons and stays there. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in. There we go. Rises to about 8,000 tons and then stays there. And our gizmo goes on to say, because the grass does not depend on other organisms for food, it is a producer. Grass gets what it needs from the sun, air, and soil. And so we know that to be true about plants, is that they are producers and that they get their energy from the sun, air, and soil. And we've talked about we've talked a little bit about that, about how plants are producers, so that should come as no surprise to you. I know that's not new information. So the next thing it says predict. Click reset. Predict what will happen on the to the prairie dogs, ferrets, and foxes if half the grass were removed. So we're going to remove half the grass. We're going to write increase or decrease in each box, increase or decrease below. And to find that out, we could experiment by advancing the year, but I think that first I want you to do is predict what will happen if we reduce, what will happen to the prairie dogs, ferrets, and foxes if half of the grass is removed. So go ahead and write increase or decrease here in these blanks. Then the next thing you're going to want to do is remove that grass by clicking the minus button. There should now be about 2,000 tons of grass. That's what I've done here. I got a little bit ahead of myself. Click advance year twice and look at the bar graph or the line graph. What happened to the population? Does it increase or decrease? Well, we can see down here once we advance the year twice. We can take a look here. We are at year 2. Here are our numbers. We can also take a look at our data here to see. So go ahead and complete this experiment, then write your numbers in here and continue out through this lab. We will be collecting this lab later this week, but you'll spend the rest of this class period or the remainder of this class period completing this gizmo. Feel free to let me know what questions you have while you're working.